Hello, my friends. How are you? Just a touch late today, but pretty close. Got some good questions this week. Congrats to all the friends at the Grammy noms today. How are you guys all doing? What's up, everybody? What's happening? Grab John here. Yo.
What up?
You know, man. Just a beautiful day in Los Angeles. I said it when I talked to Matt Beckley on Sunday, did a little stream talking about vocals. I'm now seeing the rest of the world go into winter. So I'm really thankful for, even if it's, in the low 50s at night here by the ocean, it's beautiful during the day. So I'm definitely thankful for it. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing as good as I can be.
As good as you can be. Can I also, maybe I can say collectively with you, congrats to all the friends and everyone nominated for Grammys today. Lots of friends getting recognition for their work. The Grammys have expanded a little bit. What up, Spider? Have expanded a little bit in the last year or two, or is it just this year where they're not just 5 nominations per category, but significantly more for several categories? I think
it's eight in the general categories. It's the same in everything else. 5.
Yeah, it's cool. More people get to get the resume builder, get a chance to shine. So
yeah,
it's a nice
I like
thing.
that.
It's a nice thing.
Right.
You working hard today already?
No. I'm trying to take a slow week this week, utilizing the holiday, the midweek holiday.
I keep forgetting it's a holiday.
I know. Well, nothing feels like anything. That's
a good review of 2020. Nothing feels like anything.
Well, like, it doesn't feel like what you would have expected it to feel if you had expectations, which we shouldn't. But we're human, so we do, because we have memory of times past and present. So but I'm having a hard week, but it's okay.
Well, I was thinking about it before we were getting on, whether we wanted to talk about that as a general topic. I was talking to a loved one recently. I won't blow up their spot, but they were talking about exercise and I don't know if I should do it. And sometimes it's hard. And I asked the question, which I've heard asked before, and I think this kind of applies to music work too. But with exercise, if you're not feeling well, have you ever done exercise and then afterward felt worse?
No.
If you felt better 100% of the time, and the answer was yes, and it's like, okay, well, it's a good reason to, if you're feeling low, if you're feeling bad, do the things that feel productive and will put your brain in the best spot, and you just kind of keep moving forward.
Yesterday was a really sad day, and I played tennis, and I did 2 sets instead of 1, and I sweated, and I fucking grunted when hitting the ball, and the rest of the day was manageable because of that. And then today, same thing, woke up pretty bummed, and then I got on my bike and did hills, and then I went for a low-key ride around the neighborhood after sweating the hills out, and then did a couple more on the way back home, So, and I feel a lot better. And even before getting on here, I did some push-ups to get my energy up to talk to you and everyone here, because it's just not the day, it's just not the week.
Yep.
But I don't want to not do it. You want to keep doing it even in these moments. So
maybe even especially in these moments. And it's something that, I saw Arca posted something a week or so ago about in 2012 getting rejected from the Red Bull Music Academy, and I reposted it saying I got rejected from the USC Recording Arts program when I was 18. I've been getting some DMs, given that you and I've talked about some times when we've gotten rejected from things or not gotten the gig or whatever, and it's really important for people to recognize that not only are you going to hear a lot of no's, especially in this industry, but the times when things are difficult, the people that I find to be the most successful people, like you, many people that I know, are the ones like Lemon Blue Music said in there, it's resilience. It's the ability to, in the face of difficult situations, personally, emotionally, career wise, which are of course personal and emotional for all of us that do this thing. It's not like your boss didn't like your TPS report or whatever it was. It's like these things are deeply personal to us too, that you got to figure out how to just get back on the horse and keep going, and not because you're going to immediately do your best work or the next thing you do or the exercise is going to be perfect, but because that's going to give you the best shot at getting back to where you were, getting back to your best. And you're not trying to.
My meditations all week have been the worst meditations since I started.
Yep, yep. But that's why you do them. It'll mean you get back.
I haven't missed a day.
Yep, you get back quicker to your previous baseline or to the next thing, and it's really important for people to hear, because I've been getting more DMs about people being like, I just got rejected, and how do you guys deal with that? And it's like,
I got rejected from the music school at NYU. Oh no, sorry, at the main NYU school. I got accepted to the music division, but they wouldn't let me into the school because my GPA was like 0.1 low. It's like I had a 3.65 instead of 3.75 GPA, but I got accepted into the music school. It's so weird. Like it was a weird rejection. It's like one of those, so you're going to say that I'm good enough to be in your music school, but I'm not good enough to be in your higher education, academic schooling. Like that fucked me up for a long time. And then I just sunk my teeth into audio recording and said, fuck you to Clive Davis. I don't need your school.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Shout out Clive Davis, you legend.
Yeah. I'm just kidding. That school is probably great. They had a really great program there, and I really wanted to go. But rejection happens in all sorts of ways. And I mean, it's what you do after it, what you learn from it, what you take from it, instead of, I don't like to dwell on the past. And I think it's to a fault to a degree. I don't really think about the past or future much, and I think I could learn more from the past if I actually spent time existing in it. But I like the present, and that's wild. With Jerry, same thing.
Yeah.
It's weird.
That's a really important thing for people to realize too, that a lot of the being in a creative industry is extra difficult. We've talked about it before, but it's extra difficult to do what we do in the large sense of being creative in a capitalist world, is because there aren't as many structures for how to do it. There aren't as many like, okay, you do this, you get these grades, then you go to this place, and then you got one of these kind of jobs, and then it'll be on this kind of track, and then you'll get to this management position, you'll make this kind of salary. There's a lot of industries. I think a lot of industries are actually changing dramatically just because of technology and time.
I'd love to know the statistics behind how many people today that got Grammy nominations started in the music industry a year ago or like a decade ago, and what the disparity is there. Like some people you get lucky and you get a Grammy nomination, your career takes off in a year, and some people have been doing it for 2 decades before they got any recognition. It's a weird thing about our industry and a lot of creative industries at this point, because we have so much access on the internet and social media, where you could just DM the owner of a company, be like, yo, check out my work. And like the CEO responds to you personally. It's like, yo, that's really tight. Yeah. And hires you. I was just listening to a podcast this morning, The Knowledge Project, with Shane Parrish, one of my favorite podcasts. And he was talking about cybersecurity agencies and certain other agencies, intelligence agencies specifically, not hiring anybody with any negative track record from like primary school on, right? Like one of the things is you can't really fuck up. But what that happens to mean is that you don't have any imagination, right? For all these people that didn't fuck up and didn't get rejected necessarily, they have no imagination for like any lateral thinking or just anything different than the norm that they were taught in the school. But they started contracting out what he refers to as the misfits. So the misfits are the ones that are problem solving, but they're independent contractors and they're not signed. They don't have an agreement or a contract with these agencies. And he was actually asking, I wonder what's the percentage of the people actually solving the problems that are not employees of the agencies. And he's like guessing it's way more than 50%. I was like, that's interesting. Like the misfits, the people that just think a little bit outside or a lot outside the box, and maybe they fucked up along the way and got in trouble. They're the ones that are making a lot of lateral thinking moves, different moves. I thought that was really interesting.
And it applies so much to what we do, but the reality is that means it's harder. because there aren't obvious steps to take at all times. And so there's a lot of times when there isn't a, this is what I need to do next. You kind of have to create your own goals for yourself. You got to be making things for the sake of themselves, make great art for the sake of the art, work on projects because they're interesting to you, keep trying to improve what you're doing, but you may not have a specific goal in mind of what you're going to do next. And that's really hard. And honestly, and we've talked about it before, I think that's the greatest barrier to entry in terms of having a career in music, is that you really are going to persevere through a lot of times when nobody gives a shit what you're doing and you're not making any money at it. And everybody, when you talk about it, everybody kind of looks and goes like, still doing that, huh? Like, yeah. And I actually don't recommend it to people, but I know the people that are watching this are already there. Well, like I wouldn't tell the average person, definitely try to be a mixer or a record producer or a songwriter. It's fucking hard, and it's a lot of no's, and it sucks a lot of time.
Well, I'm about also hearing this podcast and kind of understanding what it means to I'm going to use the word strategy. This guy, the guest on the podcast, talks a lot about strategy, and I don't really strategize. Again, that's part of the non-existing in the past or the future. I just think now, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. And he was explaining how the go with the flow mentality a lot of the time can be a weakness if you want to be a leader and make change. And I had this thought before hearing this. I had this thought last week, which I don't know if I mentioned on Tuesday, but I mentioned on my podcast on the most recent recording. I'm actually going to make a pretty strategic giant pivot for me in 2021. And I'm actually going to start saying no to most mixes. And I'm going to go back in the room as a recording engineer and start recording records that I also will mix very strategically with one production partner and start trying to sculpt records from the beginning to the end with this. Yeah. And I probably will lose out on mix gigs, or not lose out. I'll probably just say no to more. I'll probably lose out on money in the short term, meaning next year, I'll probably make less money because I'll, have less upfront payment work, as the mixing is. But the year after that, based on, ownership and copyrights on more records, maybe that'll change, but it's going to take a step back to move 2 steps forward. And that's a strategy. And that's a move that has to be in the understanding of all aspects of, well, why did it work for me to do this? Why could it work for me to do this? And finding that middle ground and honing in on it. And I really love the idea of just making a bold move that just says, fuck it to most things.
I love that.
Right? I think it's a big pivot for someone like me. Someone that has done the recording, done the producing, done the co-writing, but excelled in mixing, to go backwards after the experience of mixing records and what it could mean to make records sound a certain way before it gets to the mix process. You know what I mean? I'm sure you understand that as you do all of it.
Yeah, that's very exciting. And that's an interesting conceptual thing too, that there's lots of stories about this. For whatever reason, the one that's coming to mind is Tiger Woods, who, when he was at his peak, sort of mid-career peak, years ago, he took a break. I think he had a few back problems, but he actually took a break and reworked his swing. I think he was the best golfer in the world, and he said, you know what, I can do this better. Let me take a break, take a few steps back, and then rebuild what I'm doing so that I can do it even better or do it more fulfilling or whatever it is. I mean, that's a really beautiful thing. I'm excited to.
Well, something that has to be that how do I put this? Something that came to me without any question that I think was shocking to the person that I'm going to collaborate with in this process was, the goal is not to co-produce the records, right? The goal is to have the engineer credit be what it used to be with Bruce Wadian and Quincy Jones, right? Yeah. I'm sure that I'll make some arrangement moves or sonically shape things that have production affect to them, but I don't want the credit. I don't want to be known for that. I want to be known for trying to be the best engineer and solidifying what that role means in the room and then finishing the records. right? And whatever that means financially is irrelevant because I don't want the production credit. And I love that part, and doing that and making that call in the middle takes the ego completely out of it. It allows each person to exist solely in the trust of that role. And then we can be dependent upon each other to uphold that position. And that is the most exciting part.
Yeah, you become a complete sonic architect.
Exactly.
That's very, very cool.
So
I assume you don't want to. I assume you don't want to name the producer now. You want to let it get going first. I'm certainly going to ask you offline. I'm so curious. Yeah. I'm so curious about all of this.
Yeah. Him and I are having this conversation in private, and he also knows that I'm like opening up and talking about it. But yeah, just keep that between us for now, for sure.
That's very cool. And is this something that you've been thinking about for a long time, or did it come up with mixing this? It started with mixing this producer's work, presumably, and you were like,
we've been working together for a decade.
Okay.
We've been working together for a decade. And I don't know, just came to me. It's actually what happened was Spider and Rory from Unfuck were unfucking the studio and kind of realized that instead of unfucking the room, it was kind of unfucking a portion of his process, which is the engineering process, that maybe we realized that he needs an engineer. And then Spider just said that to me, like, just because we were talking in the car on the way home from dropping my car off at service. Yeah. And I didn't even hesitate. And exactly, Younger Days vibes, whoever that is that just said that. And I didn't even hesitate. I said, I should be his engineer. And Spider and I just started riffing on what it would be like for me to take a step back from mixing records that I normally would say no to. I was still going to mix the records I want, that I feel invested, that I can bring the best. But I love the idea that it's not. But
it's not me. But I'm sure we're going to work on things soon. But yeah keep going.
but it just seemed like an obvious thing in my head, and then as soon as I said it out loud, I was like, this actually feels really good. Mm-hmm. That sounds really fun, creative. Maybe I can go travel. He's doing a lot of work in London. Like maybe I get to go to London, work on records there. Maybe we go to Nashville. Maybe we go around and do things, and that could be a different. I feel like if I'm being honest, I'm in a really great comfort zone as a mix engineer right now. I love mixing. I'm an introvert, so I love being alone up here and just diving in and making things sound good, however long it takes, whether it's 45 minutes on a mix to a whole day on one mix with breaks, whatever that looks like, I love it. Yeah. But I'm also feeling like I need to switch it up a little bit. And I didn't know I was feeling this way until Spider brought this up in the car. And I was like, if there's anybody I can do this on the regular with, it would be this human. And I don't think that he begs to differ, but I think that if people wind up asking me to do it, I will say no. I think it's specific to this human.
Interesting.
And I won't be doing this as a regular position. I'd prefer mixing than to do it with just anybody.
I really like this for you. I love this for you. I think this would be amazing or will be amazing. And I also like the broader conversation about switching things up, mixing things up, pushing yourself, trying new things. Because what you're talking about, you're framing it a bit as taking a step back, but you're not taking a step back. And you know this, obviously, that you're not going back to what you did before. You're just doing a role you haven't done in a while as consistently, but with a whole different batch of experience and knowledge and credits and a whole newfound interest too. And that's a big part of being good at something or being great at something. Actually, we've talked about this before too, being super interested in it. On the micro level, the reason I am a producer is because I get obsessively interested in things for like 3-week periods. So I'm back on playing bass again because I played bass on a song a week or two ago, and then another song like a week ago. And then last night I just sat around and was like learning an Earth, Wind & Fire bass line up until around midnight. And then I was playing with Dr. Dre, and all of a sudden I'm just going to play bass for the next week or two. But that's how I've gotten good at becoming a producer, is because I get interested in these isolated things. It's why I'm not consistently an amazing virtuosic anything, but it fits nicely for being a producer. So I think the idea of following one's interest, in addition to having sort of strategic decisions, you got to combine these things. But I think people get stuck in doing a certain thing a certain way, and you can lose that that excitement, that thing that makes you want to be creative if you don't push yourself to do new things. So to me, this is like the perfect thing for you.
Yeah,
I think you're going to go, I know, you're lighting up talking about it.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I didn't know I needed. And once I said it out loud, it was like, oh yeah, I need to do this.
Somebody said in the chat here too, Shelby said it's the beauty of not having those set steps you mentioned before. That's it too. You need to, the following your interests in an obsessive way and self-motivating is the substitute for having the structures of career arc. You have to have that to replace it. You have to have the thing that motivates you from within, and you got to, get feedback from your peer group, surround yourself with people like this, like Jon. This is why we're talking live, so we can hopefully inspire other people as well. But that's the replacement for the structures of the career arc. So yeah, that's awesome. I mean,
there's unlimited possibilities because, and this was not part of the thought in the decision making, but my producer homie, brought this to my attention too. Just like the world of mixing will be opened as well, right? So there's another portion of gain coming from this, because I might work with an artist as a recording engineer that wouldn't have known me as a mixer to begin with, and then I either wind up mixing their record or their friend's record, so you're doing recording on some things, and not even recording. I don't even think of it as recording. Like, yeah, will I record a vocal? Sure. Maybe my assistant engineer will record the vocal though, right? Yeah. It's like being in charge of the sonic delivery and the sonic experience. And, operating Pro Tools, maybe I'll do it. Maybe he'll do it. Maybe my assistant will do it. Maybe the studio assistant will do it. It's not even about who does what. It's about having both perspectives in the room. Someone that's like, okay, so for example, this comes to mind, and engineers on here hopefully already do this, right? Like my homie Chris Tabaron is like so good at this exact moment. And this is what I think about of the best engineers. It's like producer, co-writer, artist sitting on the couch. Imagine them coming up with an idea, and the producer says, man, the drums should sound like this record and like that. And then like the engineer's already in the live room miking up the drum kit the way it's supposed to be. So when they're done with their conversation, the drummer's already on the way in the room and they're tracking drums. Yeah. It's like, oh, that's already being laid down. And then they didn't have to think about it. That was my job. That's my role, is to interpret and apply. So I think I love the idea of that being like in my control, and it's, and then when it's nailed, like, and everybody feels like the juice, it's like, we all collaborate on that, and not the commodity engineer that's in the room that's just sitting there with his mouth shut, like hitting command space bar and hoping some magic comes. It's like, how do we bring the magic out of the team? And like really doing that, because I'm not ambitious to be the producer. I'm not wishing that I was somewhere else in the room. Like, I want to be there in order to pull the magic out of the circumstance. And I think that's the difference between wanting the engineer credit and role and responsibility versus doing it temporarily as a producer's underling to become the producer. I think I'm old enough and self-aware enough in my career and position that I'm not there for that. And I love knowing that. It gives me a different sense of confidence to even take on this role.
The other thing I hear from you when talking about this is, and we could psychoanalyze COVID or your career in the last few years or whatever, but it sounds like it's some of your in-person collaboration desire that's going to get fulfilled that has not been fulfilled since combination of COVID and just going head on into mixing, where you're very isolated. The idea of being an introvert. I think all of us that do this, do some version of this, oscillate between isolation, obsession, lonerness, and then in-person collaboration, because music is essentially a communal art form. It's a dialogue with the culture. And there are certainly people that, I guess that would be completely isolated at all times. And there's people that are completely communal, but I feel like we all have bits of both, where we like that isolation and the solitude, and then we like the collaboration. And it seems like you've been succeeding so well in the solitude, and COVID has really magnified that. And now you're going to find a way to do more collaboration.
Yes. But not, and someone said, you know, why did you stop producing? And the short answer is because everything I was producing was speculative and never, you know, not never, like very few came out.
Yeah.
And when I mix, I'm like 95+% success rate on what I mix, and that gets released, right? So, agreed, Lemon Blue music. The dialogue with the culture bit was, I made that exact real life because that's really important to remember. And I made the decision to stop because of releases, but with this producer and our collaboration, we will be working on records that have a higher chance of coming out, with artists that are hiring this person to do their album or hiring us at some point to do their album. I'm not going to be going into speculative writing sessions. It'll be to make albums, and that's a conversation we're having up front. I'm not just going to go in there to write songs. That's just not where I'm at. I don't want to be a co-writer. If I make an arrangement move and help with a production enough that it's warranted of publishing, sure, but that's not the goal.
Yeah, you know, and it's important for people to remember that producing, and therefore, in your case, what you're talking about, engineering, there's a spectrum of definitions that producing these days can mean somebody who makes beats, who goes into a million writing sessions and is just kind of throwing things at the wall, or doing a numbers game, and then some of those things will hit here and there. And then there's producing where someone gets hired to make an album and they're with the artist and they spend the time, and that's more of the quote unquote old school way of doing it. But there's still a lot of that too. So this idea of being a producer can mean a lot of different things. And I think that, you know, you certainly could go back into, especially with your credits, go back into the former, which is you go do a bunch of writing sessions, but it doesn't sound like that's interesting to you. You want to get in and collaborate with a team over a longer period and really architect a sound. And, you know, for me, I like doing that as the producer, but the reason I like doing that as the producer is because I'm the engineer as well. And I like the sonic architect aspect of it. So, you know, when people ask about producing, you got to understand that there's a whole spectrum of definitions for that.
Yeah, I want my creative partner to come up with dope musical parts and me get to make them sound good. You know, I don't want to have to do both, because not that I or we can't do both. I can't do them both as well as someone else, just being real, because I'm not as practiced anymore at it. There was a time where I could make things feel cool and be musical. I'm not really as well practiced in that, but it's just because there's two perspectives, right? It's so much more, you know, if both of you agree that something's tight, there's a higher chance of it actually being tight, for you know, lack of too many philosophical ways that concept can go. If I think something's tight and no one else does, and I'm like, this is tight, it's probably not, right? But if like 2, 3, 4 people in the room really reinforce that, like, you know, there's just more of that. There's more of that fun in the room, I think.
It's that old philosophical saying, if one person thinks it's tight, it may not be tight. But if 2 people think it's tight, then it's much more likely to be tight. I think it was Confucius said that.
I was going to say, is that Aristotle? Yeah. Spiders better together. That's the idea. We will be better together. We both, him and I just discussed this on the phone yesterday. Like, hey, look, I brought it up as an idea, and he ran with it like, this is an insane idea. And I was like, yeah, I thought it was a good idea. Like, maybe he wouldn't even be down. Maybe he wants to operate Pro Tools and just run the show, because he can do it too. But there is something about being better together, and it's worth at least spending a year investing in it. You know, whatever the future holds is obviously unknown. Who would have thought 2020 would be a pandemic year and restaurants would be closing for a second time? Like, who the fuck knows anything? But I'm down to invest a whole year into what this possibility could.
Well, that's a very good point, and actually, I think worth discussing. That, you know, you're thinking about it somewhat strategically in terms of making a decision to do something, but the idea of, it's something Naval talks about, the idea of compound relationships. People understand if you don't understand compound interest, Google it. Compound interest, the idea that if you start with $100 and you add 5% to that every year, you're not adding $5 every year. You're adding 5% of 105, then 5% of 100 and slightly more than 110. And that number it's actually exponential. But the same thing applies with relationships. The same thing applies with especially collaborative relationships. You're not going to do this for a project or two, for a month or two. You're going to commit a year to it, and it's someone you've known for a decade. Those kind of relationships allow for a different kind of creative collaboration. I mean, there's a reason that artists, when they find a co-writer they like, they stick with them, or a producer. But, you know, when you get into multiple years of a relationship or multiple projects of a relationship, you're going to get results that are strong, but also are strong in a different way than people who are just really good, who write a few songs together or work on a few things together. And that's something that I think is actually undervalued right now in the music industry, because things can be so quick and produced remotely and that sort of thing. The ability to get with a great team of people, you know, some of the most successful records that are starting to come out, even if they're young folks that are just starting to do it, they're, you know, I mean, look at Phineas and Billie Eilish. Obviously, they have the most compound relationship, brother and sister. They've grown up together. But even you look at like Omer and 24K Golden, some of these people who have found sort of a synergy together. Those are rather than going out and doing a million sessions with all of the biggest pop writers and trying to make a record together like that, making a full body of work with collaborators over a long period is a really, really important thing, especially for people coming up.
And sharing meals with those people and drinks with those people and getting to really intimately know those people so they trust. It just really comes down to trust in the room, right? I mean, the more you trust, the more vulnerable you're about to be. Yes, Omer is the best. Omer is insane. So that's really what it comes down to when you see these collaborators and the same credits. Like for me as a mixer, a lot of the times I'm bummed because I'm like, I really feel like I could bring something to that record. But then you see who mixed it. You're like, well, they've been working with that person for a decade. I mean, I'm going to step in there? That's like, in a sense, that's not even fair. Maybe if they want to go a completely different direction, I can understand that shift. But I understand why they would keep working. Yeah, more trust, more risk-taking, exactly. Okay, look, you spend a day going a different direction with people you trust on a record, and it doesn't work out, you just try again the next day. If you do that with someone that you never met before, you might not get back in the room with that person. Yeah. Whether it's the right or wrong move to make is irrelevant. It's just that's not the right time to do it. Time,
having that trust and having those long-term relationships. Some of my favorite writers, we will, have had hits with, we've had lots of cuts with, we've worked on all kinds of different projects. Sometimes we get together and don't write a song for 2 days because it just doesn't make sense. But we trust each other enough to know that when it makes sense, when it's going to happen, it'll hit perfectly, or we try things and they don't work and we're okay with it. We don't get stressed out about it. Trust is such a huge thing. And for you to go in to and try to be a collaborative sonic architect with someone over a long period is going to produce very different results than just being great at your job and working with different people. It's very exciting.
Couldn't be more excited.
There's this conversation. Well, maybe we should, let's see.
Do I have any questions? I mean, we did half the time on my pivot.
I love it, man. I think, this applies to so much of why we do these streams, is for people to hear how we think about things and how we change and move around and inspire each other and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
This is maybe my favorite question. Ben asked this question, and I don't know if everybody's going to be interested in this. I know you will be, because this is something that happens to me a lot. And I have some thoughts on it, but maybe I'll let you go first. I don't know. So Ben asked, he's talking about meditation, which of course we're already into it. And he said that he's getting to the place where when he's in a meditation and having thoughts he can sort of concentrate on, then they dissipate, but music continues to loop over and over in his head. The same piece during the meditation. And this happens to me almost every time I meditate. And now that I've been doing an hour a day, I haven't done it yet today, but this will be day 34 in a row of an hour meditation. I will have different songs throughout the course of my hour that just loop. That's how my brain works. I have songs in my head right now. Like they always do it. They always do it. They always do it. And
Wow.
how do you, and he's like, even when I think about other sounds, the song will creep back in. My answer is that's part of it. Like it's just another object of meditation, and without judgment, let it just exist and be there. But it happens to me constantly. It sounds like maybe it doesn't happen to you. What is
At all. I
At
love
all.
that you're able to answer this. I've never.
Really? Even when
No,
you were
as soon as
starting
I-
meditation?
As soon as I sit down, no, never. Yeah, I actually can't think about one time where that's in my head. No, never.
That's very interesting.
I already have a pretty detached relationship with music. When I used to, when I was producing more, I would have dreams of Melodyne, and like I would be tuning. I'd have dreams of like pitch correction, which is really sad. I don't even.
Oh, that's upsetting.
It's so upsetting. I used to do that. I used to hear melodies that weren't right in songs that I was
You'd hear
co-writing.
incorrect melodies.
Yeah, I'd hear incorrect melodies.
Like incorrect performances, or what?
Incorrect performances, and also like we didn't nail that melody in the hook or something. Like in a writing session, like I'm not as good at writing hooks, so I don't know how to get this to be better. I just know it can be better, and that's like the producer mind. And so I used to have nightmares about that. But once I started meditating and mixing more, I like to get those songs out of my brain as fast as possible and get onto real life, because that's not real life.
It may be a function of time spent too, because if I'm working on a song, like I've been working on some of the Grace and Chant stuff, and we wrote a couple of great songs, and he and I are going back and forth on the production. But I will listen to the song and play parts of it over and over and over and over, because I'm not mixing it. I'm going there and trying to create, and I try a new thing, and I'll play some bass on it, but I'm hearing the hook, or I'm hearing the song over and over and over. So then when I get into my meditation, one of the 5 songs I've been working on the last week inevitably just comes into my head and starts just looping and looping and looping. It happens every time I meditate.
Wow.
Every time. And there's occasional times where it'll release, but even when I go, okay, I'm going to use this as the, kind of like any other thought. It's the object meditation, and then it dissipates a little bit, but then it's just kind of running. Then it's just, I think.
I wonder if my version of this is I see recipes when I meditate. So instead of.
By the way, whoever had the over under on when Jon starts talking about food, it's 38 minutes in today, guys. 38 minutes in.
I'll be like, oh well, I could toast those nuts before I grind them. Like I'm gonna make a special Persian rice dish for Thanksgiving to bring over to a friend's place, and I'm already thinking like, all right, well this time around I'm gonna do something different, where I'm gonna toast the pistachios a little bit first to bring out more of the flavor, and mix it with the sesame first and whatever. So when that's actually, sounds really lame to say it out loud, but when I'm distracted in meditations, it's a lot of the time how I'm gonna plate a dish that I might be making for the next week.
I love it so much.
It's a weird thing, but maybe that's my version of hearing a song over and over again, that I might separate myself from my mix work to get back to real life, because though mixing is a huge part of my life, I like to experience the present. And when I'm not mixing the song, I don't want to hear the song anymore. But food is always on my mind. So maybe that's my version of it. I'm always distracted by recipes. Always.
It's an important thing for people to take from this, which is, Jon and I are very close friends. We both get a huge amount of value out of meditation. But if you need any more proof that everybody's different and there's no right way to do it, all I think about is my crushing anxieties and mortality and looping songs, and Jon thinks about plating food.
Yeah.
And it's extremely useful to both of us to have meditation time. It's really important. And I
I don't know what I would do without it. I have had a little bit more.
Well, you wouldn't know how to plate food as well. That's the answer.
I know. I visualize I have the vision for the plate before the that's really funny. Spider, a consequence of intermittent fasting. It might be exactly what it is. Like
you're just hungry.
I've been doing 24-hour fasts, like 3-4 days in a row now. So I'm like eating at 4 p.m. and I don't eat again till 4 or 5 p.m. 3 days. Yeah. So like maybe I'm just hungry, but I think it's actually different. I'm so inspired by serving people food, whether it's one person or a group of people. It's my version of producing a record. Like I love producing a dinner, and it's hard during COVID. So I feel like I'm using this year in isolation to practice. So next year I can serve people bomb ass feasts. But for some reason, it's about the process, because I don't like to use recipes, right? So I'm making the recipe up in my head, and sometimes I'll write it down, and sometimes I'll just improvise. So I did a very traditional stuffed eggplant Persian dish with lamb and herbs and spices, and I added like chestnuts inside. But I know visually what that looks like from seeing photos, but I didn't use any recipe, and I made it from meditation. Like I sat there for mornings on end, and like it came up, and I could do this, I could do that, I can cook them, I could bake them together, or I can make them separately and then plate them together. So you have the roasted eggplant being its own thing, and the lamb and chestnut stuffing being its own thing, and the herbs another thing. And then if you leave the herbs out of the heating process longer, it retains the green color, which makes it more beautiful, right? So like, no, I'm being serious. Like,
I love it so much. I'm
then you can equate.
Enjoying it.
So what if you're doing a song or a mix and like, the song's great? Like, why are you rushing to add all these other ingredients? Get your drums and bass down, and in a mix, let's just talk about it in a mix form, get those feelings solid because they already exist. And in a writing producing world, like get those solid, and then like come back, take a break, come back and add maybe some like, ear candy bits. And so I just like, during mental mise en place, it's fantastic. Yeah. Mic drop. I don't know. Whoever that is, mic
that's
drop.
The best.
Let's move on. That's great. It's exactly
that's actually a really great piece of advice. I've been thinking about this more, this idea of those of us that are trying to do it all, producing and mixing, and you're kind of basically doing it all together as you go, trying to finish productions. If you know something is great and the song is great and the vocals are great and you have a great structure,
let it marinate.
Let it marinate.
Great. Let it marinate.
When the song is great and the vocals are great, let it marinate. I've been doing that more, and my productions have gotten simpler and I think better because of it. Where you get the vocals, you get everything, you get the vocal comped, the vocal is solid, it leads everything. I find a lot of times when and I've seen other people do this too, in the writing process or the creation process, people overproduce when the vocal's not great. They overproduce when the song's not great too. And if you don't have a great song and you're producing, you're in trouble. But if the song is great and the vocal's not great yet, the tendency is to try to dress everything up to make up for the fact that it's not capturing your heart or your loins or whatever.
I'm actually, the only hesitation I have from my career pivot that I was talking about is this moment. Is hired as the engineer, and I don't like the song, and I'm sitting there, because in a mix it's different. In a mix, it's
short
already
amount of
all
time.
there, shorter amount of time, less investment, and I can find something in every song that I like when I'm mixing. It's different when you're in the beginning sculpting it, when you're like, this isn't even gonna do anything. Like no one's gonna listen to this. And that's the only fear that I'm grappling with right now, as I came up with and said yes to this idea moving forward, that moment when you just know, you're like, I've heard a song like this before, and this one's not as good as that one.
How do you deal creatively as an engineer or a producer or a mixer with a song you don't like, that you know isn't any good? And that's a really big challenge. I mean, it's something that, I learned from Eric Valentine. He would hone in on certain aspects, because there's no way he can love every album track of the rock band. Like, there's just no way you can love everything equally.
But you can love that snare sound. You can love those background vocals with the chorus on it. Like, yeah.
Find the thing to love about it, because if you don't love something about it, you're going to suck at your job. And if you're getting hired to do a great job, if you can't get emotionally and creatively invested in every aspect, or every song, find an aspect that you can feel passionate about and do your best work. Even if it's just, I'm going to get the right mic and the right compression setting for this, Beatles sounding snare, whatever it is.
Sure.
Like you want to get it right. That's an interesting thing. And I think that's a healthy fear for you to have.
Because I deal with it in mixing, but with mixing, I go, okay, well, I just mixed a song like this last week. That's a better version of this vibe, but at least I think it's still a cool vibe. I just think the one I did last week is going to be better. Like that artist is better. They're connecting with me and the potentially with the audience more. But when you're in the room and you have to make it from scratch, it's harder to fake it that much longer. And not even that I'm faking it. I just can objectively say, this one's not as good because I'm also hearing this one. And I don't know if that makes sense to a lot of people listening, because it's a lot of the time, might be working with the same producer and they did the same thing with two different artists. And you're like, this one's better. It's just like the lyrics better. The melody's just slightly better because it feels like like that day was better. Whatever made this one better just feels more emotional and you're connecting to it more. Maybe that artist has a higher placement on New Music Friday or whatever it's going to be, like hierarchical issues. And it's different when you're there from the beginning. And that's the only thing I'm afraid of. Well,
and the two thoughts I have on that is, one, it's actually good to have fears about things and then do them anyway, because sometimes your fears aren't realized, sometimes they are, and you learn stuff. There's all kinds of good reasons to have fears. The other thing is, it's always important to realize that if you don't think something's great, you might be wrong and change your opinion at some point. It's happened to all of us where you think something, you're like, I don't know, I'm not so sure about this. And then you see it through to the end. You're like, fuck, that really works. That's really great. And then you'll be glad you did your job. And I know you know all that, but it's important for
it's important to bring up in this context. Yeah.
Especially in the creative process when things are starting out. I mean, there's been so many instances where I'm not sure about an idea, but the artist is really excited, or the other producer is really excited, or whatever it is. And we just go, cool, let's see it through. And then they turn it into something that I didn't expect, or it was better upon execution, or they believe it in a way when they performed it that I didn't understand. And then all of a sudden it just hits you in the chest and you're like, this is amazing. I'm so glad I didn't shoot this down like I would have when I was 20, because I'm like, I don't like that.
I mean, the famous quote, the only certainty is uncertainty. It's like, that's how I live my life. I really am not certain about most things. I'm certain that 1 + 1 = 2, because if you don't operate that way, you should get off social media. You should get off the internet. Like, we have to have a couple of foundational facts in the world, just a couple.
Shared reality is important.
Yeah, exactly.
It's getting more and more important too.
In the room, we should have a little bit of that. And that goes back to our conversation of trust and working with collaborators, that you speak the same language, right? And then that's the same thing in intimate relationships and friendships. Like, you can disagree on a lot of things, as one should with a partner or a friend that's boring otherwise, but you should be acknowledging each other as with full and utter respect in this together. And I think that's something that gets lost in the same day session, right? And like you know what I'm saying.
I totally agree. You want to hit a couple of quick technical type questions?
Do I have to?
You don't have to.
Let's do it. No, I'm just kidding. Let's do it. No.
I like this one. It was a really simple one. Stephen, a lot of female vocals when they're belting are really aggressive, from 3 to 3.5K. Any mics to record or mix tricks? I mean, my answer to this is why I love tube mics, and anything where you're going to get some saturation, some natural harmonic saturation that's just going to soften that type of stuff. The other thing is mic technique. That's kind of the biggest in my mind.
Yeah,
but
what mic technique and what room you're in.
Yeah.
Because that might be more room reflection back into the mic.
That's interesting.
And then the bigger question would be, well, what about it is aggressive, and do you want to maintain it? So if you want to maintain the aggression, how to control it versus getting rid of it. So does it serve the song? Because it might be where that artist's sweet spot is. So how to manage it versus seeing it as a 100% negative, Yeah.
And this answer won't satisfy the the asker of the question as much as it will be educational for everyone else. But if you get a belted vocal right up on the mic and it's super harsh, don't do that next time.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you're kind of stuck in a lot of ways. There's ways where you can do some saturation and you can automate EQ for that one point, or you can try some other things. But in the end, and to circle back, this is why you're doing what you're doing, because you'll never have that vocal ever again if it's something that you're engineering as well. And this is where the knowledge of engineering. And look, even if you end up with a recorded vocal that you are then the mixer and have to treat, understanding why and how it got that way can help offer more solutions. I mean, like you said, I wouldn't have even thought of maybe it's the room, but of course that's, if somebody's belting something, then all of a sudden you're getting extra reflection from around the room. And the room
sheetrock walls, you're just compounding on top of that harshness. So it might not be their fault. You know what I mean? We can't. My whole point was, let's not blame it on the singer and
don't hate them.
But yeah, I think that's a great question, how to deal with that. But there are mixed tricks to deal with it, and they're like Matt said, there are saturation tools to control that stuff. I talked last week. I love the spectral shaper. I talked about the Kid Leroy vocal, like the Ozone 9 spectral shaper is a great way to kind of control and warm up that region without reducing it too much or getting rid of it, because that's where his presence is on that vocal. So in a weird way that might sound counterintuitive to a lot of people, I'm doing two moves on that style of vocal where I'm controlling it and reducing it, but also doing a more narrow band boost after it in that same area that gives presence, but with a different tone, right? So like controlling that harsh tone and then recreating that tone with something warmer sounding that still offers that presence. So I don't want to think that that's a negative space, even though I hate that frequency range. We all do. We all hear it 3 to 5 dB louder.
That's why telephones
biologically.
Are in that range.
Yeah, exactly. So we, as humans, we need that that range. And I think you identify a great mixer by the amount that they control that range, and also let it remain and give presence. So.
And people, again, understanding why we talk so much about saturation, because saturation changes the harmonic content of a sound or a frequency range, if you want to do it more band specific. And then that allows you to manipulate it in a different way. If you're just cutting a bad frequency by reducing it, it's still there in the same configuration. It's just slightly lower compared to the other frequencies. But if you add different kinds of saturation, you will actually get a different character to the sound.
Yeah, you rebalance it.
You can then manipulate it in different ways. And if you guys haven't seen, I think it was at the end of last week, we haven't put up clips yet, but Jon talked about in more detail about the Kid Leroy vocal sound and shaping that sound, which is a beautiful vocal sound on that EP. Let's see. Oh, I like this one too. You've talked about this a little before, but what would your mix bus be if you had to mix in the box? If you didn't have your Fern stuff, or you didn't have, you probably wouldn't do too much to it. I mean,
probably would just use my Ozone preset that I've made. That's really subtle. That would probably be it. I would probably do something on subgroups individually. Again, we've talked about this, but I have a kick group, a rest of drums group, a bass group, a acoustic keyboard group, a synthetic keyboard group, a guitar group, strings, horns, lead vocal, background vocal. Those are my the main groups. So I would individually maybe do some different love on that with some tube emulators, some even order harmonic emulators, maybe a clipper. I would probably do things individually and tone shape. I do think it would be difficult for me to mix without my mix bus, just because I lean into it a certain way that gives me headroom to kind of hit things a little harder. And what we're talking about, balancing harmonic content, there's something magical that these tubes do that fill in the gaps. And if you look at an analyzer in Pro Q3 or something, for example, and you see a sound, and then I put it through that gear, and the sound has these spiky things, you'll start to see the other harmonic content coming up and balancing it out so it's not so spiky. I want to mix through gear that does that and fills in the gaps so I can actually know the right things that I want to take out, right? It makes my decision making easier and the reductive nature of my process. So that's a good question. It's a little irrelevant for me because I don't think I want to mix in the box.
Yeah.
It is in the box. I'm summing in the box though. So like the mix bus is out of the box. That's specific. I'm not mixing out of the box though. So,
well, this is we talk about glue. People ask about glue all the time, and I think almost everybody overdoes it with the idea of gluing your mix by doing mix bus compression, all that kind of other stuff. Having a very subtle, consistent things that, like you said, if there's aberrant, crazy bits of harmonic spikes, a very subtle amount of tube saturation is going to even that stuff out a little bit, and that's why tube mics are great and tube guitar amps are great. And
also, just a quick thing on what you just said, glue. We've talked about this in earlier episodes. We've also had so many episodes now, which is crazy. We've been doing this for a while, and we only missed 1 week.
Yeah,
it's like 20 something weeks in a row. It's been almost half the year, dude. This is crazy. Arrangement is glue. Yep. The arrangement of the song creates the glue. I don't rely on sonic tools for the glue. I rely on how the balances are stacked of the arrangement.
And we've talked about this before. We did a whole hour on, and maybe we'll do another whole hour on saturation harmonics. It's such a great topic, but people should check that out as well. This idea of arrangement where you have a combination of, there's two things combining. You have sounds that are not overlapping in frequency range, and then you have complementary sounds. So it's the combination of both having things that complement each other, both in tone, in frequency, in harmony, in that sort of thing, and then things that aren't running into each other. That's one of the biggest things. Like, if you have a song that's well arranged, mixing is super easy. If you have a song that isn't well arranged, then you're like, okay, how do I get this guitar out of the way of this vocal? They're playing the same notes. They're playing the same at the same time. They're in the same range. Arrangement solves so much of this. So those of you that are watching that are not just pure mixers, or even those that are pure mixers, understanding why these things happen, arrangement will solve most of those problems. Fix
it in the mix is not a thing for sonic and for arrangement moves. You can do wonders, but you shouldn't rely on it.
Yeah, you can sort of soften edges and massage some stuff, but you're not going to fix things that are broken. Well, we got another 2 minutes ish. I mean, we could call it here. It feels like a good solid hour.
That was good.
I also need to pee, so it's perfect. So I can get that.
Glad I got to talk about the pivot, because I think that's something that, and just kind of full circling that and these problems and that room issue we just talked about. Just really quickly, I can kind of circle it back.
Please.
I think that what's interesting to me is getting to mix the record while recording it. So by the time the day is done, where the artist has left and we're done with the production, it potentially is already mixed.
Yeah.
Right? Like doing it all at the same time. And I don't think you can say you're doing it at the same time if you've never mixed a full record from start to finish by yourself, only as the mixer. Yeah. I think my unique position in what I'm talking about is highly specific to, I've spent 15 years mixing records, 5 years doing it exclusively, only mixing and not doing anything else. And now going back with that ear and that experience to mix from the beginning while recording and producing. I think it's specific because I won't record the vocal too hot, right? Because I know what I want it to be like later. I won't record the guitar too hot, but I will overdrive the guitar to get it to sound hot.
Yeah.
But knowing the limits, so later on, that's not dictating the sound as much. When someone says, yo, can we get more of this out of it? You're like, oh, I kind of can't. And having that dialogue the entire way and committing when it's time to commit, but also leaving yourself room to make more mix moves at the end. But you're making them collaboratively with the team. And that's something that I'm really excited about doing. I don't remember the last time I've done that. So,
Jon, I'm very excited for you and for 2021. Thank you guys all for checking it out. We got the stream I did with Matt Beckley on vocals is up now on the YouTube and on the podcast version. This will be up tomorrow. Please hit us up with questions. give us feedback, that sort of thing. I'm going to hit a bunch of people back in DMs for questions we didn't get to. Love you, John.
Love you too.
And I'm going to call you right after this.
Okay, cool.
Bye, guys.
All right, bye.